Hi everyone, my name is Katie. I'm a primary school teacher from the UK and I'm currently teaching abroad in Hong Kong. I receive a lot of messages over on the 4Teachers Instagram page talking about ways to build positive connections with the students that you teach. And even though it might sound a little bit obvious, I do get a lot of questions asking about ways to talk to students when you first meet them. Suddenly you go into a classroom and you're surrounded by children and they all come up to you and start talking to you, and you want to build a connection, you want to build a bond with each student, but it can be quite difficult to know exactly how to do that. With that in mind, I've decided to split this video into 3 different parts. Part 1 of this video is going to focus on when you first meet a brand new group of students. If you are doing your teacher training, this might be your first teaching placement, or if you're just volunteering in a primary school near you to gain some experience of what it's like to be inside a classroom, that's the part where I'm going to talk about the first day when you first arrive and you don't know how to begin interacting with them. Part 2 will be all about building a positive relationship and getting to know your students. This might be the next step after that first day, so you're kind of trying to get to know the personalities of your students, you're trying to establish yourself as either a trainee teacher or a volunteer, and you want to encourage the children to get to know you as an educator, but you want to get to know the students really well too. Part 3 of this video will focus on extending a student-teacher bond to help promote academic achievement and build confidence. To sum up, I'm going to talk about ways that you can use your classroom management skills to help the students in your care to achieve their personal best. When you first meet a brand new group of students, you never quite know how they're going to act around you. They might be shy, they might be distant, they might be really chatty, really excitable, they might be really huggy and they want to come over and they want to get to know you and they ask you a lot of questions. You never really know what you're going to get as a student teacher. When you first meet a group of students and you walk into a room for the first time, try to think about how you want to establish yourself as a teacher. Are they going to call you by your first name? Are they going to call you by your second name? Have you already discussed this with the class teacher, and what do they call the class teacher? Every school is different and every school has their own way of doing things, but if your name is Jack Thompson and you walk into the classroom and you introduce yourself as Jack, the students are going to remember that and they're probably going to keep calling you that. Even if you ask them nicely, say, can you call me Mr. Johnson, it will be quite tricky once they know your name. They're really going to like using it. I know in the UK normally you will go with your second name, but it can be different in different schools and different places around the world, so just try to figure out who you're going to be before you're presented with a group of students, because it's probably the first thing they're going to ask you. One of my top tips at the start is try not to change your voice too much when you are talking to children. I've seen a lot of student teachers that use a really babyish or childish voice when talking to children, and I actually personally don't think it's that effective. It might be different if you're working with really little children in early years, but as far as primary school children go, I've always found that being myself and using my normal talking voice is much more effective when I meet a group of students. I don't think you need to put an act on. I don't think you need to talk to them as if they're little babies. Of course, you can think about what you're saying and make sure what you're saying is completely appropriate for their age level, but I don't personally believe in putting on a really babyish or childish voice when I'm talking to my students. I use the same voice when I'm talking to my students as I'm using right now, and I think that they really appreciate it, and it's much easier for me to maintain and not have to think about using a childish or a babyish voice when talking to a group of students. I have mentored a lot of student teachers in the past, and when they first meet the children in the class, they want to get to know them, so they tell them about themselves, they ask them questions, and there's a getting to know you process. I would say if you are going to be teaching that class later on yourself explicitly, rather than working with them in small groups for the duration of the placement, try to establish yourself in a way that is friendly, and do let them in on your life and let them know things about you, but try not to tell them too much. Try to establish yourself as a professional person as well. It is absolutely fine to tell the children about yourself as a person and your likes and your interests and your hobbies, but just be cautious of becoming too pally with the students. An example of this might be if you are going into a year 5 class for the first time, it's your first time working with a group of students, and maybe some of the children in the class might tell you straight away that they really love playing Fortnite. Of course, this is all down to personal opinion, but if you do respond by saying that you like playing too, and you start having a conversation about the game, and you do start talking about playing online and what you do at the weekends and what your character looks like, and it can be really nice to bond with students over things like that. However, at the very start when you first meet them, they might start to sort of imagine you as this teacher is really pally and really friendly and really fun, and it might be a little bit harder along the line to suddenly establish yourself as a class teacher that stands at the front and manages behaviour and looks out for classroom management. So just be careful of how much information you give away at the start. try and focus more of your energy on getting to know the students and getting to know what they like and dislike, and then you can slowly feed them little things that you like too, and they can get to know you as a person as well. I guess that's more my own opinion than something that's written in an official teacher handbook somewhere, but it's just a little top tip, a little something that I've learned along the way. When you first meet a group of children, they may or may not have had other student teachers in before you. They might have had some inconsistencies with people coming for 4 weeks and then leaving again, or students that come in for a few months to teach and then they leave again. So it can be difficult when students are used to saying goodbye to people and they've had a lot of random adults come in and then leave, and they get to know someone and then they go again. So just be really mindful of that. You're an additional adult in the classroom, and it might take them some time to get to know you and accept you as someone who's going to come in and teach some lessons in their classroom too. Now on to part 2, which is all about building a positive connection. You've met the students, you've maybe worked with them for a couple of days, and now you're really trying to get to know them. You're trying to get to know their personalities, their learning styles, and you're trying to build a stronger relationship so that when you start teaching lessons yourself, you feel as though you already know quite a lot about the students that are within your care. Try not to ask too many closed questions like, do you like school? Yes, no. Do you like maths? Yes, no. What is your name? Where are you from? Try to open up the questions that you're asking a little bit more so that they ask the children to think of more than just a one-word answer. Anything that really gets them thinking about 2 different answers they could give, or a personalised response to a question that you've asked of them. Sometimes you can try and link this with the curriculum that you're teaching, but sometimes it's nice just to have a really random discussion with your students. If we could have a class pet, would we choose to have a lion or a Komodo dragon? Which one would you rather have? Something as simple as that can start a really interesting discussion with children, where some children might say, oh, this because I watched a show about it, or this because it's my favourite animal, or none of them because I think it's a really bad thing to be keeping an exotic pet in the classroom. That wouldn't be fair. We don't have enough space for the animal. And just something as simple as that can create a really nice discussion where you get to know the children and you get to know their prior learning for a lesson, and it can just open up a really nice discussion. So try using would you rathers and quiz questions as much as you can with the students to build a connection. The next top tip I have is to value the things that mean a lot to the students. If one of the children within your care comes up to you and brings you a shell that they found on the beach and it's a really nice shell, I know that you might be busy and you're marking a book or you're working with a different group, and I know there might be a more appropriate time for you to acknowledge this shell, but if it means a lot to that student and they've thought of you or they've thought of the class and they've picked up something special, something that they've chosen to bring in and give to you, it obviously means a lot to that child. Try to acknowledge it, try to share your own enthusiasm for it, and you can say, why did you choose to bring this in? Why is it special to you? Would you like to show it to the rest of the class? That's something that I've tried to do more this year. I've had children presenting things as simple as a screw that they found which links with the machines unit that we're looking at, and there are obviously other ways that you could be using this time, but for that child it's acknowledged the fact that they've gone home and they've continued their learning at home and they've made links with things they have in their own homes, and that can be such a big deal for children. So try and notice the little things that are important to them and make sure they know that it's important to you as well. Finally, part 3 of this video is going to be all about encouraging children to become the best versions of themselves. This is the part where you've got to know the students within your care, you've built some really positive relationships with your class, and it's time to now utilise this bond and use it to help them to achieve the best that they can, whether that's an academic achievement, whether that's through self-confidence and self-worth. There are definitely ways that you can use the bond that you've created to help the students to become the best versions of themselves. Once your students feel valued and they know that you care about them and you know that you have their best interests at heart, you might be more likely to allow a child the chance to be self-reflective. So if they bring you a piece of work and you know that it's not their best ability, you know that they've rushed it, and you know that they've not really truly applied their skills to it, now that you have a relationship and you have a bond formed, you might be more likely to say to a child, do you feel as though that's your best work? Can you feel inside your heart that you've really truly tried with this? Does it feel like a good reflection of you? And maybe your students will be able to be more truthful once a connection is formed, and they will be more self-reflective. Hopefully they will be able to look at a piece of work and they will know in their hearts if they've truly applied themselves. But unfortunately, I do sort of feel like you have to have that relationship in place first before you can start telling children that what they're doing is not up to standard. Nothing seems to boost academic performance better better than knowing that the other children in your class acknowledge your skills and they know what you're doing really well. And I think a lot can be said for allowing students the chance to tell each other what they like about each other's work, and hopefully they will mimic the language that you're using that's really positive and really reflective, and they will start using it with their peers as well. An extra tip that I'm going to share as a teacher is that I always believe it's really important to be as transparent as possible with your students. It is perfectly acceptable to have a lot of personal things that you don't share in your classroom, that you don't share with all the students, and that you don't share with all the teachers that you work with, and that's absolutely fine. But I do think there is something very special about trying not to lie to your students and trying to tell them the truth as much as possible. An example of this might be I took a morning off to go and see a specialist doctor about a concern that I had, and when my students asked me where I'd been when I got back into school, I decided not to lie to them. I told it as it is. I said, I've been to see a specialist about a problem. It's looking like everything's going to be okay. You don't need to worry. And the students just sort of nodded and were like, okay, that's fine. And then we continued our day. I didn't feel the need to say that I was in a meeting, and I didn't feel the need to say I was elsewhere. You can tell students the truth and you can trust them with things. I think the more that you do trust them with things, the more trust they will give you in return. I hope this video has been useful for you if you are going to be working with children for the first time soon. If it has been useful for you, please consider giving the video a thumbs up and clicking the subscribe button, which is just below the video here. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please put them down below in the comments box, and be sure to follow 4Teachers on Instagram for lots of teaching updates. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.